Job is to be the water boy. I knew I wouldn't be able to hold it and my notes at the same time, but I can do that and this. So if we'll bring the lights up a little bit, let's do a Q&A. Now, while you're thinking of questions to ask, I would ask you to not ask spoilery questions, right? Pretend that you are the only person who has read a given book that you're asking a question about in the entire room, and you don't want to spoil it for them. I will repeat the questions, or do we want them to come? We have a microphone? Oh, great. Where are the microphones?
Sorry, we have one microphone on each side, and then we have one up in the balcony in that corner.
All right, how are we going to determine who asked them? Okay, let's get like a couple people to line up at each of the microphones, and I'll just go one mic to the next mic and things like that. And we'll start over here, and then I'll go over here, and then I'll go up to the one over the corner there. So, there you go, go ahead. Oh, it's not on. Okay. It sounds like it's on now. Soul stamping? A soul stamping in form of corrupted investiture. Not in most instances, but it is possible to make it such. Yes. All right, question over here. Oh, we need that microphone on. Go ahead.
What would happen if Azure's sword was wielded against Nightblood?
If Azure's sword was wielded against Nightblood, terrible things would happen. But Nightblood would be the stronger of the pair. Good question. All right, up there.
What is the name of your parrot?
My parrot's name is Magellan. The reason we named him Magellan is I'm building an office that is themed toward kind of an explorer's club. So we wanted an explorer name. And as soon as I came up with it, my wife and my children said, "Oh, you can call him Jello because he looks like a bowl of Jello." So actually, he is called Jello by everyone in the house. As I wrote in my newsletter, we are still working on teaching him not to think that ears are something tasty. He's a baby right now. It'll take us a little while.
Okay, so in the Nulpus system with the cognitive anomaly, does it orbit the star, or is it stationary in space?
Is Nulpus
the cognitive anomaly?
Oh, the cognitive anomaly, does it orbit or is it stationary, Rapho? Good question. You can pick up a Rapho card, though. We have them. We'll go get one for you. Okay, over here.
All right, what would happen if Nightblood was drawn inside of a perpendicularity?
So it depends on the perpendicularity. It has a good chance of collapsing. Yes. Up there.
When will the second arithmetist book come out?
Oh, when will the second Adam, the posters look great. I can't see those. Okay, so here's the deal with the Arithmetist. Arithmetist was the book I wrote right before the Wheel of Time hit me like a train going very fast, right? I was not expecting this in my life. The books I was working on at the time were The Liar of Partenell, which is Hoyt's backstory, and The Arithmetist. And both of these books got derailed to one extent or another by me dropping everything and working on The Wheel of Time. And when I sat back down to write The Arithmetist too, I had been derailed for so long, and so much had happened in my life, that the outline I had just did not work. I wasn't pleased with it. It is one of the things that I consider a mandate that I must do. I will finish it, but it's going to take me a little bit more time. I've been slowly clearing off, I've been trying to write things like novellas that don't promise sequels as much, and finish off the things that did promise sequels. So I finished off Legion. The last Alcatraz book is basically done.
Oh yeah!
It is called Bastille versus the Evil Librarians, or subtitle Alcatraz versus his own dumb self. We're actually sending that off for artwork and things, so that should happen pretty soon. There's like one little scene that needs to be revised. And then Arithmetist will be on the list of things to do. So I promise it someday, but I'm just not sure when. Stormlight 4 is going to take all of my time for the next 7 months still. most likely. Like I won't be done with that until July 1st. And then I really need to get the next Wax and Wayne book done. And there are 2 more books of Skyward that I need to write, so we'll see. My biggest goal is to not, whatever I do, not let myself slip behind on Stormlight books. Because these kind of form the backbone currently of the Cosmere sequence, and so those can come out less frequently than about once every 3 years. Once every 3 years is about as fast as I can do them. They take about 18 months, and I need about 18 months off between them, otherwise I'll get burned out. So there's an answer that's not a full answer for you, I'm sorry. It will happen, I'm not sure when. All right, over here.
Do you know what Spence's favorite color is?
Do I know what Spence's favorite color is? Yes, blood red. Go ahead.
I love audiobooks. Do you give the narrators for your books on Audible coaching on proper nouns?
Yes, we do. This is usually something that Peter handles, right? Karen does it. This is something that Karen does. Once in a while, they get me with a tape recorder, but usually Karen and Peter and Isaac are all reading the books so far ahead of time. And Karen and Peter in my writing group, and they're hearing me say all the names of things. They can usually just rattle them off. You can thank them. They are very particular with the audiobook readers and making sure that we get good audiobooks, because in the past, before we had as much control of things, sometimes we got audiobooks we weren't as pleased with. That doesn't mean that the audiobook readers will always pronounce everything the way I do. This is partially because sometimes I pronounce things different ways at different times. This is also because sometimes we get them too late. This is what happened with the Stormlight Archive, where sometimes Kate Redding and Michael Kramer will pronounce the name differently. They're married, but sometimes we don't get the names to them in time. They just kind of go with what looks good to them. So we apologize for that sometimes, but we try.
We love the audiobook!
Oh, thank you! All right, go ahead.
What's your favorite idea that you're never actually going to get around to writing?
That I'm never, or I am eventually?
Either or.
Either or. What's my favorite idea? I always talk about my favorite idea that I haven't written yet, which is the idea about the magic system that's based on diseases. Like when you catch the common cold, you can fly, but when you get over it, you lose the power. Which I just think would be kind of cool and kind of chaotic. I had another idea the other day that was really cool, but it was for a video game. And if I tell you, it would spoil it, so I'm not going to tell you that one. But I don't know if I'll ever make this one, because video games, I don't know if I will ever be able to make video games. I have tried, and it has not worked. So, we'll see.
Do you know what the Starsight book is the main idea of?
What's the main idea of the Starsight book? Yes, it is. In fact, I write a little quote in the front of most books that I sign, and in Starsight I'm writing 2 words. It's called "see them." Now, you won't understand that until you get that part in the book and explain it, but when you get to that, that's kind of the theme. That's what the book is about to me. So when you read that word, those words in the book, you'll know that you've gotten to it. Telling you too much now would be a spoiler. All right, go ahead.
How does arithmetists draw a Marx cross structure if they can't cross their own lines of forbiddance?
Yeah, so you can get it right up close, and I kind of made it in my mind that if you get right up close, it kind of snaps together. That was my workaround for it. That you get up and make it. You can't actually. It's like a magnetism thing where you can kind of push into it a little bit. Does that make sense? The harder you push, the more force it pushes back on them. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. So those were my workarounds in my head. I had to come up that one actually didn't strike me until I was halfway through the book, and I'm like, hey, wait a minute. How do you actually make this line work? And so I kind of put those 2 things on it. So that's the in-world reason, but I didn't talk about it at the time in the books. Up here.
So it's known you're a big fan of Magic the Gathering.
I am.
And that you like House and Mirror.
Yes.
And you wrote Gabrielle Kane's Planeswalker. You're going to work with Wizards of the Coast again?
Yeah, go ahead.
And then things about Magic, it's known you play some. Where would we find information on that?
So will I ever work with magic again? I probably will. I usually can't leave well enough alone. But the thing is, I wrote that story, which you guys can read. It's called Children of the Nameless. I wrote that. It's free online. Instead of doing other stuff I was kind of supposed to be doing, and it is what has put me behind, like on Wax and Wane, which I wanted to have done before the next Stormlight, and stuff like that. So it's not likely that I will do it anytime soon. I need to catch up on things. What I would really like to do is sometime kind of go in at the planning stage for a plane, like right at the beginning, and maybe even like write a book and be like, this is set, on a plane. Let's use this to build the mythology of a plane or something like that. Kind of be in from the ground up on it. But I would probably have to move to Seattle for like 6 months for that. That's far off in the future. If you want to play Magic with me, once in a while I play at local game stores. I go to Game Grid now and then. Mostly I like to draft or to cube draft. You can watch me cube drafting online. The latest newsletter has a link to a place that some people I've been drafted with. But it has been harder and harder. Early in my career, like when nobody knew who I was, it was great because the signings would get done at like, I would get there at 7, they'd get done at like 8:30, right? And they'd be like, hey, who wants to play Magic? And there'd be usually some people are like, yeah, let's go play Magic. We'd go to like a hotel, and we'd sit in the lobby and we'd play Magic and stuff. Nowadays, my signings get done at like 4 a.m. And so, yeah, that just doesn't happen as much anymore. Sorry about that. All right, go ahead.
So I'm an aspiring writer, and I really relate to one of your characters that has really smart days and really stupid days. And I feel like I've had maybe a handful of really smart days, and every other day I just feel like an idiot and I don't know what I'm doing. I wonder if that's you writing maybe some of yourself into the story or into that character.
Yeah, totally.
And how have you gotten over those stupid days?
I actually got it, Howard Taylor, who's a cartoonist friend of mine, one time was talking about on our podcast how some days it just feels dumb. And I'm like, I feel like that sometimes too. Sometimes it's not working, it's not flowing, sometimes. And what I found with writing is, now your mileage may vary, but what I found is readers can't generally tell which of the two it was. It's more in your mind and more about your mood than it is about the actual quality of what you're writing. And what's happening is, on some days, you're just upbeat and you see what you're doing is being, is working. And on other days, you're doing basically the same thing, but you're a little bit down and your mind's like, oh, this is terrible, you are crap, no one's ever gonna wanna read this. And the truth is that it's actually still pretty good. The other thing that causes that a lot is, particularly if I'm reading something really good, like I go read a Terry Pratchett novel, and then I go to write, I'm like, what am I doing, right? But what you're doing there is you're comparing your first draft, the published final drafts, by authors who've been doing this for 40 years. And that's just not a fair comparison to you. If you want to go read my terrible first story that I wrote, the one that won the award, you can read that and be like, this is what Sanderson was writing? I'm better than this. And you probably are. In fact, I hope you are. And I would recommend trying to silence that voice as opposed to trying to reach for the smart days or not, because the truth is, you're probably just as smart on both days, you're just feeling down, and instead try to look for some of the things I talked about earlier, the idea of creating good habits, knowing the things that you can do that put you in the mood to actually do what you want to do. Listening to music will do it for me. Going on a walk if I'm having trouble while listening to that music, and it's the right epic music. My playlists are on Spotify, by the way, and the stuff that I do this with. Just look for Stormlight 3 writing soundtrack, and I have one for Skyward too that I think I posted. Just listen to whatever works for you. But you have to find out what tricks yourself, like I talked about earlier. But every writer feels this. You are not alone, and that part of your brain is probably wrong. Okay.
So on Earth, we have like snakes that have heat pits that can sense heat, and bugs that see into ultraviolet.
Yeah.
On Roshar, are there varieties of gremlins that can see
Industrial?
temperature?
Yes. Is there someone up there? Yeah.
What criticism of your work do you feel is the most apt?
What criticism of my work is the most apt? There's a bunch of them. I would say that the criticisms of my handling Matt and the Gathering Storm are pretty on point. I actually had an inkling before I released the book that they were, because some of the beta readers had told me, but I didn't know how to do it better yet. Generally, my weakest part of my books is probably going to be the prose. I strive for what we call Orwellian prose, which is window pane prose, where the prose is transparent and you can see the story happening on the other side. But a lot of times, if you come to some of my prose, I repeat too many words too often. We try to watch for those things. But you're not going to go to a Brandon Sanderson novel and very often get the really beautiful prose that you're going to get like from Pat Rothfuss's book, for instance, or something like that. And that's just kind of, it's partially a stylistic choice on my part, but it's a stylistic choice because I know where my strengths lie, if that makes sense. And so I think that's a pretty valid criticism. The other thing would probably be that Stormlight is really hard to get into. And that's not by design, and that I don't want a book that's hard to get into, but the story I wanted to tell was one that was hard to get into, if that makes sense. And it's kind of like a drawback of the story that I didn't want to change because it would make it a different story, but it's totally a legit drawback to getting into the Stormlight. There's a lot of stuff to track. I wanted to be upfront with it because the whole series is going to involve a lot to track, but there are people for whom the Stormlight is just not the book for them, and that is just okay. Let's go over here. Let's do one more round. So I'm sorry for everyone waiting in line. We have to get to the reading, and we have to get to the actual signing. You can ask me a question when you come through the line if you want to. So I'm going to do one more from each. So go ahead.
Is it true that there's a mural of the Cosmere in your basement?
Is it true that there's a mural of the Cosmere in my basement? There is not a mural of the Cosmere in my basement. Isaac is painting a mural of the Stormlight Archive brochure map, but that's not in my basement. There will probably be a mural in my basement as we're finishing the office, but it's probably going to be is it a Van Gogh? I think it's going to be a Van Gogh. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I have a friend that snuck this question to me, but is Mbot your ideal own pet dragon, essentially?
Yeah, Mbot's pretty close. But, yeah, I've mentioned before that Mbot came from me basically writing a dragon story, but with a spaceship instead. So yeah. Go ahead.
If a misburn were to burn a piece of a shard blade, what would happen?
So this would be hard to make happen, but it would be possible. Shardblade is going to act as basically an alloy of the god metal of honor. And so what would it do? Raffo! But it is possible that it would do something. It would not just, it would not be inert. It would be allomantically viable. So, there you go. Yeah, thanks guys.